y'all ever wondered what makes alcoholics and drug addicts tick? Why they continue to do the things they do? Such as continually drink and drive despite the consequences. Or spend all the rent money on drugs. Lose the house, the car, the job, and even their lovers. Are these people crazy, you ask yourself? Why don't they just stop? Can't they see what they're doing themselves? Madam Toastmaster, fellow members and guests, today I'm going to attempt to explain to you what makes up true addiction. Let's start by giving you a little background information. Alcoholism and drug addiction are very similar in nature, in that alcohol is a drug. According to Chris Raymer, who is the Recovery Services Director at La Hacienda, a highly respected rehabilitation center in Texas, addiction is a disease that is genetic in nature. About 15% of the population has a genetic predisposition to it. Now, there was a study done in the 70s that is going to help support some of the points I'm going to make. Heroin addiction was an epidemic in Vietnam. In 1971, forces were dramatically reduced, and about 20% of the troops that were coming home were addicted to heroin or opium. Now, the government put all these troops through a 7-day detoxification program. And upon return to the United States, Washington University did a study that lasted 3 years that followed up on these people that were addicted. And they concluded that 12% of the 20% that were addicted went on to become re-addicted in the United States. And we've had a bear of a time trying to keep them sober ever since. Now, this study goes to show that not everybody that becomes addicted to a substance is an addict or an alcoholic. Some people are just heavy drinkers or heavy users. So what makes up real addiction? The first thing is this thing called the physical allergy. Now, one that has the physical allergy probably has little control over how much of a substance they're going to use once having started the process with one drink or drug. Like I have the physical allergy, for example. I used to tell my girlfriend, honey, go in the bar, gonna have a couple of drinks, be back in about an hour. See, it was my intention to go to happy hour. Happy hour would end, people would start to leave. I'd be like, hey, where are you guys going? We're not happy enough yet. So I would stay, close down the bar, because I couldn't stop. Now, these 20% of troops that got addicted in Vietnam all had this physical allergy. But why is it that 88% of them were able to go through this detox, dust themselves off, walk away, and never use again? Because there's another piece to this true addiction thing, and it's called the mental obsession. Now, this mental obsession is described pretty well in this book called Narcotics Anonymous. It says the obsession is a fixed idea that takes us back time and time again to a particular drug or some substitute to recapture the ease and comfort we once knew. So my mind keeps telling me, you haven't drank in a while. You can probably have a couple of drinks and all that crazy stuff that happened before won't happen again, right? And this other book called Alcoholics Anonymous describes what happens to the real alcoholic or addict when this mental obsession kicks back in. It says, the fact is, most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. Now, so none of these past consequences I've experienced were enough to keep me sober. And the same with that 12% of the troops that became re-addicted. Why? Because we had the mental obsession coupled with the physical allergy, which makes us true alcoholics and addicts. In essence, we're powerless over a drink or a drug. So we got a guy. The goes out. He gets two DWIs, loses his job, and gets a divorce over it. He says, I'm done with this. I'm going to rehab. I'm going to take care of this problem once and for all, and I'm never going to do it again. And he means it with all his heart. His family and friends get hopeful and excited. He goes to rehab. He comes out. 2 weeks later, he's drunk again. And they're like, what? Are you insane? And the fact is that, yes, he is insane. What happened was the mental obsession kicked back in, left him powerless or defenseless against that first drink, and once having had that first drink, kicked off the physical allergy, and the rest is history. I want to wrap this up today by reading you part of a story out of the back of this Alcoholics Anonymous book. This is about a guy who's talking to a doctor trying to figure out what his problem is. Because after talking with him for a time, I heard myself saying, Doc, I think I'm an alcoholic. Yes, he said, surprisingly, you are. Then why in God's name haven't you told me during all these years? 2 reasons, said the doctor. First, I couldn't be sure. The line between the heavy drinker and alcoholic is not always clear. It wasn't until just lately that I could draw your case. Second, you wouldn't have believed me anyway if I had told you. I had to admit to myself he was right. Only through being beaten down by my own misery would I have ever accepted the term alcoholic as applied to myself. Now, however, I fully accepted it. I knew from my general reading that alcoholism was irreversible and fatal, and I knew that somewhere along the line I had lost the power to stop drinking. Well, Doc, I said, what are we going to do? Doctor, there's nothing I can do, and nothing medicine can do. However, I've heard of an organization called Alcoholics Anonymous that has had some success with people like you. They make no guarantees and are not always successful, but if you want, you're free to give them a try. It might work. Many times in my intervening years, I have thanked God for that man. A man who had the courage to admit failure. A man who had the humility to confess that all his hard-won learning of his profession could not turn up the answer. I looked up an AA meeting and went there alone. Here I found an ingredient that had been lacking in all my other efforts I made to save myself. Here was power. The power to live to the end of the day. The power to have the courage to face the next day. The power to have friends. The power to help people. The power to stay sane. The power to stay sober. That was 7 years ago and many meetings ago, and I haven't had a drink during those 7 years. Moreover, I am deeply convinced that so long as I continue to strive in my bumbling way towards the principles I first encountered in the earlier chapters of this book, this remarkable power will continue to flow through me. What is this power? With my AA friends, all I can say is that a power greater than myself. Be still and know that I am